ladies and gentlemen. Let's start with Master Wincenty. For it is impious not to worship what reason has established, what the religious custom of the ancestors has in honor. So in original version, irreligiosum enim est ea non venerari, que ratio instituit, que devota maiorum veneratur religio. We find this sentence in Book 2 of the Chronicle of the Poles by Master Wincenty, known as Kadłubek. And it expresses the entire personality of Master Wincenty. It shows the depth of his reflection, his independence, and honesty in formulating opinions, and even his mastery of words. I propose that this line will be our guide during today's meeting. Noteworthy is the role attributed to reason as a force that creates laws and traditions that are respected not because of their ancient origins, but because they are rational, they are reasonable. And Vincent confronted similar attitudes and mentalities, we can say, that are close to our times. He stated, "For we of today are and know nothing of the hoary past, because I don't even know if there was a past before this present." Well, tradition and history urge us only by the force of its rationality, just as truth imposes itself by the force of reason. It is not a matter of mere knowledge of history, but of understanding it, its function. Through understanding, we can better discern our times, because man is the same all seasons. To understand Poland and its political and cultural context even today, we have to understand Master Wincenty. And we are today speaking about Master Wincenty as lawyers, because for a modern day Polish lawyer, it is a real joy to discover that foundational work of Polish culture is based on legal discourse, fundamental legal categories, case studies, and considerations that are still relevant. So Master Wincenty, using the Chronicle and what wanted to teach Poles at that time and many generations after, not history of Poland, but how to keep the Commonwealth together. Well, he called Commonwealth res publica, but it is our peculiarity that in fact we don't translate in Polish res publica as republika, which would be a direct translation, but we use our own word, Rzeczpospolita, which perhaps can make us a little bit similar to 4 states of United States, like Virginia or Pennsylvania or Kentucky or Massachusetts, that still use Commonwealth instead of state. So there is no difference in meaning. Sometimes they say that Commonwealth more expresses that it is a community established for the common good, and Republic is a mere way of governing and a way of government that is established in a specific way. But at least there is a kind of original closeness, an original attitude of Polish people to res publica. So for this reason, the Chronicle of the Poles was not written as a typical chronicle would be, but as a story about the deeds of brave Poles. So to praise the golden pillars of those who were before, of our ancestors, and to see all signs of nobleness in the previous generations, as it expresses it in the introduction to the Chronicle, Master Wincenty. So he points out that as Poles we have our identity, which as long as it's rational should be protected. And we don't have to replace everything with what comes from outside, from other countries, in the case of Master Wincenty from the West. And we should be proud of our own culture. So he shows realism about human nature, and the nature of world politics, and he tries to cultivate civic virtue of the Poles. And for us, of course, most important thing is that Master Wincenty, who was considered and is still considered by many a historian, in fact was a jurist or a lawyer. In the Chronicle and the other documents he left behind, the knowledge of Roman law and canon law is quite dazzling. He could have acquired it only in the then emerging schools of Paris and Bologna. As probably the first Polish graduate of foreign university or studium generale, Wincenty shows that even if Poland seemed at the time to be on the periphery of great politics, it certainly did not become a backwater intellectually. The level of familiarity with and access to learned law, which is seen in the Chronicle, there are many quotations and references to Roman law maxims, almost 200, and less to canon law, which even more shows that he was a typical civil law jurist, is immense. And when the Roman law in Bologna was just starting, and even the University of Paris was not yet established. So this means that Polish youth, represented somehow in the person of Master Wincenty, in fact, became a part of intellectual renaissance of the 12th century. And in order to enrich the knowledge and to enrich the practice of the state, of our Commonwealth, to serve Commonwealth, even at the time when Poland was disintegrated at that time, when the great political projects of 10th century, 11th century seemed far distant, and the country was experiencing a number of destructive fratricidal conflicts. So Wincenty was young and educated. He went abroad, but he was proud of Poland and cared about preserving and forming his and our identity as Poles. But of course, he was not only the first lawyer. We can say that he was first in many ways.
You want me to?
Yeah, of course, to jump in, because there is one peculiarity about his life.
We were thinking about having this chat. In fact, thank you for having us here. We are really grateful, and it's an honor to have you here in this room. Sorry for bothering you with Master Wincenty, or Vincent, who lived on the turn of the 12th and 13th century. You might say it's an old story. It doesn't match very much today's activity. But you know, we teach Roman law, and it's very difficult even to explain what we're doing here. Because we should translate it into teaching civil law. You know that for legal world we have two planets. One is common law, and this is what started with England and Wales, and then you have Ireland, but not Scotland. That is mixed jurisdiction, and now on the continent, that we teach civil law that is based on Roman experience in private law, that is about property, about law of succession or inheritance, about persons, about contracts, about dealings that sometimes are called torts on this planet of common law. And well, we teach that. In fact, our university, the State University, and this is the only university in Poland where our subject matter is not obligatory, it's semi-compulsory. And in fact, when they asked us, why do you teach that, and you don't teach like Greek, you don't start with Greek law, why at all you teach these things? We say, well, our master, Jesus Christ, was used to say parables to people. So we say a parable, a lot of parables about law. Okay, and even I was presented here that I have some interest in American law, in freedom of speech and freedom of religion. In fact, my classes, I have these classes like for over 20 years. I published 2 textbooks in First Amendment issues like freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and they look at me, they start, why are you talking about that? Because it's good, because it's kind of parable at home in Europe, having a lot of foreign students, foreign for us also, from European Union, from outside European Union, from Turkey, for example, to tell them something about freedom of speech and freedom of religion that are common issues, that are important to everyone, but to say they, the Americans, the Supreme Court of the United States, they do that, they decided, they are, so in fact, if we think about freedom of speech, the teacher is basically the most liberal person in the classroom, because people say about hate speech, so we try to use these legal examples as parables. So now I return to Master Vincent or Vincentius, who is a parable for us, because we have this story that is quite contemporary. Of course, he is important for Polish history for reasons stated before. He published a Chronicle of Poles that is composed of 5 books. And in fact, 4 books are quite historical. And the first book is full of what you can say fairy tales. And historians, especially on the turn of 19th and 20th century, they started to attack Vincentius. Well, we come from the University, Jagiellonian University in Krakow. And in fact, his chronicle was used as a textbook in that academy that it was founded 1364 to teach rhetorics, to teach about our history, and more to teach about something that you could call our identity. And the identity is a turning point. And one of our political thinkers, political analysts, started to say, we don't want to enter discussion with historians. We want to take Father, he was a priest, he was a monk, and a bishop, and a very particular bishop because he resigned. I know that it's not surprising you after abdication of Benedict XIV, but the 16th, but it's quite rare. He resigned, he went to the monastery he founded, made of Cistercian French monks, close to Krakow. But he is important for us for several reasons, also as a kind of parable. Historians started to attack him about fairy tales that the legendary history of Poland that doesn't really match facts, but it matches political issues and political thinking about basically our identity. And he was very first in several things that was started. He was an intellectual of the late 12th century. He was educated for sure in Paris, maybe also in Bologna, and he returned to Poland hoping for change. That was a very difficult time. Poland was divided after the last will of Bolesław III, the last will that said from 1148 that said that the country should be divided in 5 parts. 1 part is for the oldest one and 4 parts for the sons. So the oldest one has his own part, and feudal division. You might say this is something normal, but something that started that made them think about, ask questions: who are we? How we differ from the others? Well, brief story is, we got our baptism. We entered the Western world through Czechia. So not to take our baptism, not to act for baptism Germans. We asked for baptism Czechs, and we took it from Prague. Do you know what is the difference between Poles and Czechs? Czechs are proud of being always a part of the Holy Roman Empire of German nations. We were always proud of not being part of this. Okay? And this is the difference between us. Okay? I don't say this is better or that is better. This is different. So there, of course, we were on peripheries, like England or Wales or Scotland were on peripheries of the Europe of that time, not very close to French and German lands or Italian lands and universities. We were on peripheries, and that guy, who was one of the smartest, most brilliant intellectuals of his generation, you have to remember there are 2 generations before St. Thomas Aquinas, more or less. So scholastics is only developing. And he was first for several reasons. But also these parables allow us to think freely. Okay, what happened? Normally, bishops were nominated by princes and kings and emperors. This is the first time, returning to the question about the first, this is the first time when the prince residing in Krakow decided not to nominate a bishop, but said, why don't you canons, so there were canons of the cathedral church, the main church in Krakow, why don't you canons elect a new bishop? And they had problems. They were confronted with a democratic process, and they had problems. They elected 2, and they could not decide. Okay, they could not decide. So they had to call the Pope. Then, so not the prince was the arbiter here, but they called the Pope, Innocent III, who was to decide who is going to be the first one. So Master Wincenty, educated person, he was a provost of the chapter, so first of the canons of St. Domiesz. But here he was elected the same diocese. He was elected bishop here, and he was the first bishop that was elected. So, and the first one who had these ideas mentioned here, the first one who used the word res publica, that is, you might say republic, but we translate it as Commonwealth. And the first one who started to talk following John of Salisbury. You know John of Salisbury, who was assistant, who was secretary to Thomas Becket. We don't know whether he met him, but in person. But he was under impression of the idea of John of Salisbury that ruling, governing, being a prince, a king, is a service. It's a duty. And there are responsibilities. And in fact, what we have here is the first one who talks about Polish history in a way that it's presented more universal than just saying what were the facts and what happened. So he starts with the tales, including dragon, but about that a little bit later.
Exactly, and that being first, as was presented, so first chronicler, first jurist, first who said about republic, first bishop who resigned, but also, and first bishop in fact was elected freely. That was very important at that time, especially because his friend was Innocent III. And that played a role as well. Perhaps that's a good story, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it's well invented, since what we know for sure was that also Innocent III studied in Paris and in Bologna. So possibly he studied theology in Paris and law in Bologna, but whatever it is, perhaps the same path was also path of Wincenty. And when the question arrived to the Pope, and perhaps it was even a very fortunate coincidence, because it helped not only to allow to say that it is not the Duke or Princess that is electing bishops, but also in case of doubts, it goes directly to the Pope. So it secured and sealed the Pope's independence in selecting bishops. So then, of course, the formal reason was that the Wincenty was from the same dioceses. So it's better to have an insider than outsider. But then
we still quarrel about that.
In Krakow, especially. Yeah. So still, it's a kind of a local tradition is better. Although there is a kind of a sign that Innocent III very much praises Wincenty for his various talents, etc. But when before being a bishop, in fact, what we also know was that he was very much involved in legal stuff. So also during his bishopric, he was also involved in introducing reforms. So he was, for example, in the first delegation of public bishops to the council, Lateran Council in fourth Lateran Council in 1215. Usually in Poland you say that if you see in the church the vigil lamp, you immediately associate with Wincenty, because he was the first, at least there was the first document that he signed to provide wax for candles in front of the sacrament, which was of course introduction of a reform of the Lateran Council. So it was not like his invention, but it was like his action as a bishop, etc. However, what is quite interesting, the first document when we meet Wincenty is in fact a ducal document, so before he became a bishop, long before, perhaps just after he returned from his law studies, when he is in fact signed here, Magister Vincentius, as we can see in the picture. And in fact we can say that he was the first in-house lawyer, not the most known in-house lawyer, but he was the first in-house lawyer because he just had to run the Princess Royal Chancery. So prepare documents, etc., formulas for the documents. So that's how we can present the person. And what we should return to, and that is in fact most important, are these stories and tales. Since we are here to say about the Commonwealth and how to protect and how to teach Poles about Commonwealth. So in fact he was lawyer, so he was very comfortable with using Latin. Even we know that his skill to use language from different poems that are in the Chronicle, different jokes, linguistic jokes that are hidden there, and of course this helps him create stories. Lawyers need to know how to tell stories, especially stories which are memorable and which are very moving. And the keepers of a republic are not only rule makers or rule followers, but also storytellers. Even today, or especially today, we need to tell the story of our republic, the story of our Commonwealth. Social norms are carried from one generation to the next exactly through stories and through lessons they convey. Obviously, abstraction is important, but illustrative story are very moving, and they are constituting the narrative of our history of our republic, and even what we associate our state, our Commonwealth with. It was very well understood not only by Master Wincenty. Already we can return to our Roman law staff or ancient Rome staff and Cato, who, according to Cicero, said about republic that nostra autem res publica non unius esset ingenio. So our Commonwealth was based not upon the genius of one person, but sed multorum, but of many. Nec una hominis vita, sed aliquot constituta seculis et etatibus. So it was founded not in the life of one man, not in one generation, but in the long periods of several generations and many ages of men. And today we expect everything to be now and immediate. Whereas what is human, and which perhaps can help us in front of artificial intelligence challenges, is that we are vulnerable and we need time and we need to learn from our errors, and then we can create memory that is long-term memory. When you look at the methods of Master Wincenty, in fact, we can refer to these broader contexts, also returning to English context. So we already learned about John Salisbury and Thomas Becket, but really at the very same time, or just a little bit before, was active Geoffrey of Monmouth, or very famous English chronicler, master at Oxford, whose influence extended to French territory, which could have also influenced Wincenty himself if he was in Paris at that time. And in fact, Geoffrey of Monmouth used similar methods to tell stories, and we know that he created a very effective historical narrative of British Celts. Yes, he distilled images of Sans of Albion, images of King Lear, King Arthur, Merlin, which we are still present till today, even without maybe more depth analysis, but still these are some images that we can associate with. And just as effectively and facing similar criticism that was described, so criticism of being ahistorical, being like pure fiction, etc., Wincenty told us the story of Poles. And in fact, we also have a set of different, maybe sometimes strange images that usually as Poles or even as tourists to Poland we may come along. So we have our image of Krak, the founder of Krakow. More famous especially is the Wawel dragon. That is something that for those who were in Krakow is a dragon cave, so everyone somehow meets the dragon. We have Princess Wanda. And of course, we have also defenders of Głogów, which is more related to Polish memory, and of course the image of Saint Stanislaus, the Bishop of Krakow, which are quite important images in our society till now. So let's go. What we know from the stories today usually is that we remember only, for example, Krak, because it's somehow related to the name of the city, Krakow, but obviously we don't remember anymore the legal stuff which is behind, because that was the method of Wincenty to transmit through the catchy, very simple story or a nice story, some legal principles. That's why he was a lawyer. So in fact, what he learned in Paris and Bologna constituted a framework in which he developed his narrative about our republic. So Krak the king. All therefore greet him as king, and he makes laws, promulgates statutes, and so the knot of our civil law, in Latin used civile, as regarding used civile, was formed, and its birthday came, for before it liberty had to yield to bondage, and equity followed injustice. And what was just was that which was most beneficial to the wealthiest, says Wincenty. But strict justice did not take hold at once. From then on, however, it ceased to be subject to overwhelming violence, and justice was called that which was most beneficial to the one who was least. So, in fact, in this very simple image of Krak, we were transmitted very important informations or notions for our Commonwealth. So first of all, that everyone greeted him as king. So we have very early idea that in fact the king, the Krak, was somehow perhaps elected, and that people were eager to accept him as king, which of course in following ages becomes more obvious for us when our monarchy was elective monarchy. So we elected of course there was a dynasty monarchy, but at some point we started to elect our kings, which obviously allowed to transmit that idea that Commonwealth is something different from the person of king and person of monarch. That is something more, which obviously helped us, especially during the times of deportation where Poland disappeared from the map. So we are a community that is behind the Commonwealth. Obviously, quite interesting idea which from this story we can take is that there is no freedom without law, because in fact here King Krak is establishing a free state thanks to introducing ius civile. And moreover, not only civil law, but important is also justice. And what kind of justice we can have here? So we have like kind of a social justice, we can say, that we care for the weakest, which is obviously can be directly traced to perhaps Plato and Gorgias or Timaeus dialogues that are referring to that difference between justice considered to be what is beneficial for the strongest, and the other justice which should protect those who are weakest, which also give us flavor that at that time, 12th century, we were in fact, we have an influx of both not only Roman law, so ancient Western law at that time, but influx of Greek philosophy, which constitutes the mindset, of course, merged together with Christianity that arrived to us as the first. And the justice, in fact, is quite interesting for, in this context, for Master Wincenty, who even creates his own distinction between innate justice and legal justice. It's a very simple distinction, but it serves him very well. So he says that there is an instinctive justice, that we know what is true and what is right in the situation, but in fact we should always mitigate that very intuitive movement of our reason by referring to legal justice, so to referring to procedures, that there should not be any trial without listening to the other party, that everyone has to have a room to defend himself. And in fact, that's why it was so good work to use as a class of rhetorics at the university, because in the Chronicle there is a constant back and forth with arguments for one or the other party, even if they were even if they were traitors to the Commonwealth. Wincenty still gave them a solid argument based on the very solid principles of law, which shows that he was a true lawyer. And then thanks to that, rhetoric class was absolutely easy. And then through that, we were first Europeans to learn our own current history, the history of current state. Usually during liberal arts, during that first period of university, you learned history only of ancient Greece or ancient Rome, but not the history of your nation. Whereas thanks to that rhetoric textbook, we learned also about history of Poland, or these tales. But anyway, it was very, very influential for our knowledge about the state and about the Commonwealth. But then, after the establishing of the city of Krakow and kingdom, there is a crisis. And that always happens. And the Commonwealth is vulnerable to crisis. And this crisis is very much connected to the next image. So to the image of a Wawel dragon, who in fact starts to endanger the state, endanger the monarchy. Well, it's a man-eating monster that wants to destroy the city. Is there any legal or political important information in the picture of dragon who wants to eat and terrorizes the city?
Okay. So we start first with a myth, of course, because it's nice to present to tourists, especially kids of our tourists, that we have a cave of a dragon under the royal hill, and that there's even a kind of dragon there that has some fire every 15 minutes. So people are amused by the fact and say, okay, it's a legend, it's a fairy tale, it's a story that is said, but nobody really believes it. The dragons here, Chinese are surprised when they come, because for them dragons are positive animals, positive symbols, and here dragon is a symbol of everything that is negative and of the evil itself, And well, the myth was important for Greeks, was important for Romans. We didn't suppose that we come from Troy or we come from Rome. We are locals. We come from where we are. Maybe we came from the meadows of Volga, next to Volga, because our group we differ basically on names of the sea. In our languages, sea is for sea are different words used. But before dragon, let me start with women. okay, with a woman, okay? It's always a wonderful subject.
She was after.
Yes, she was after, but you know, she's a fascinating person, and this is a tragic story. I don't like tragic stories, and you probably do not like tragic stories, but I'm thinking about Wanda. And Wanda, is not really a tragic story, it's a myth. That we had a princess who was supposed, in Krakow, who was supposed to marry a foreign prince. A foreign prince from the group of tribes that were not really our friends. We didn't consider them friends. They were Western, maybe they were superior culturally, but they were basically our conquerors. So she was assigned to, in fact, she had to, according to political reasons, as a ruler, and she was considered a ruler. A woman was, in this myth, woman is the ruler of Krakow, and she was supposed to marry a Aleman, we can say Teuton or German prince. And to avoid that, she just committed a suicide, just jumping into a river. And you might say it's not a good story. First, it's not very inclusive. It's not very European. It's tragic because it's not a euthanasia, but Poles accepted Hungarian princess from the French house of Anjou as our king. She was crowned after the death of founder of our university, Casimir the Great. She was sent by her father, Louis the Great, King of Hungary, to Krakow, one of three sisters, the youngest. She was sent to Krakow, and she was crowned the king. And she decided, she was a diplomat, great diplomat. If we think about Teutonic order, they were very open to her. They were very always calmed by her. And as I said, well, we got our baptism from Czechia. It came through a woman, in fact, because our prince married Czech princess. And this is how we were baptized. So this Hungarian princess, King of Poland, decided to marry a prince of Lithuania, Jogaiła. So this was the way to baptize Lithuania. It was her decision, and there was no doubt she was the King of Poland. She was crowned as a king. Next year, she married this prince, and he became the king. She remained a diplomat. She renewed the university. She founded a theological faculty at the university in 1400. She died prematurely, but then she paved the way. Think about Bloody Mary. People say bad things about this daughter of Henry VIII, but without her, Elizabeth first or second wouldn't be the king, the queen, I mean the king. And now they start to rehabilitate Mary, King of England. We don't need to rehabilitate anybody. We had then Anna, the last of Jagiellonian dynasty. She married István Báthori, Prince of Transylvania. And he became the king, although she expected diplomats to visit her first, as she was crowned before her husband, King Stefan Báthori, as we say, István Báthori. So let's return to the dragon. All this story about women are more interesting in this context, but dragon, there's a myth of dragon. Would it be possible to have dragon there? Master Vincent tells us the story about Grak. The spelling of Grak, as you have seen before, reminds us the way that we spell name of two brothers who were reforming Roman Republic before the difficult times of the 1st century BC. Krak, the founder, he was a prince, but he was a prince that based his power not only on succession, but on this, that he was cooperating with Raleigh. He was cooperating with common meeting of everyone, and people were accepting his power. So the idea that is presented by Master Wincenty is, we had a kind of agreement between us to have a ruler, but then this is all about politics. It's all about power. It's all about governance. And then, in the rocks next to the city, you have a dragon, who is, this is original name that we find only in this work of Master Wincentius, Holophagus, the one that eats everything, okay, devouring everything. So this is the evil. So, of course, we gather, we organize our political life, and we know we are able to confront the evil. And then, of course, the question is how to confront. So there are two sons of Krak that go to kill the dragon. And you can imagine this time there's a happy end story. They succeeded. But this is not the end. Returning, they were thinking, who was the one who killed the dragon? So one of the brothers killed another one in order, you know, even if you are an atheist, if you are a cultural person, if you are an educated person, you know Genesis. You know that Genesis gives us human experience, tells us very much about us, and at the beginning of our history is not only what we call original sin, that we say, who is going to decide about my life? Is there any God? Even if there is God, please remember this discussion between Eve and the serpent was originally considered an internal discussion. It's very nice to say there is Satan, there is devil coming from outside and tempting you. No, you are able, this is the story, you are able to ask these questions. Why is someone going to order me something? Was there any order from outside? This is what here we had, innate justice, equity, some kind of natural law. Would it exist? No, I'm the ruler, I'm the founder, I decide, this is my life. I think I'm in charge, I have the power. This is the beginning of the story. And it repeats always. We are capable of such an attitude. And the second point, just at the beginning of our history, is one brother killing another one. So we have the same story here. Obviously, Master Vincent, he knew that story, but he wanted to say something about politics. Politics is to fight with evil, to avoid evil, to organize our society. But organizing is not enough. We started with Krak, organizing our society, and we know that evil exists. So organizing society is not only for organizing society. You have to be vigilant all the time. You have to be capable to locate where is the evil. Because then the capacity of the political system is also to create evil. And one brother kills another for sake of taking the glory, for sake of taking the power as well. So the story of the dragon, of course, is kind of myth. We don't really think about any dragon existing. Is a founding myth saying, yes, there is evil. We can fight it. We need to combine our forces to do it. Politics is important. Politics is not to be avoided, but we have to be vigilant. We have to be careful. So then we need to have checks. I won't say checks and balances because this is constitutional law here, and you will have different connection to that. But then you have to control power. And then, of course, there is a lot of... So we have these parables that tell us about us in indirect way. Why parable is good? Parable is good because it gives audience a margin of decision. I don't impose. Master Wincenty is not imposing on anybody anything. You might read it on the level of fairy tale. You might read it on the level of a myth, an identity. The element of identity is what we have here, what we had on the previous slide, is that about freedom. Freedom is a part of us. We think about us as a republic, as Commonwealth. Yes, we are in our Polish thinking, political thinking, influenced by Roman Republic and Cicero. Yes, that's true. But from the very beginning, The first intellectual that whom we can read and who was read then and who influenced minds of generations and generations of Poles studying in Krakow and not only there, was that freedom is a part of our identity. And prince and the ruler is a person who consults his power. Of course, someone needs to be in charge. Even in my parish, we are 12 in a parish. There need to be a parish priest who decides. If everyone decides, we have total disorder. That's obvious. So power is a part of our agreement and of our living together. And then we go to law. That law is basically about goodwill, good faith, you would say in English, good faith. Because it's not about penalties. It's about agreement to follow certain rules. So this is what we have here, but also the obstacle, the problems, the crises that we are going to confront. And there are several crises to be met. Please.
So exactly the crisis that was symbolized by the story of Dragon was in fact very much also a current situation of Poland at that time, as we already told about this disintegration and fratricidal conflict that were at that time. Even there is yet another image, less known, of Zbigniew, who was a son of Bolesław III, who divided the country between his sons, which resulted in that fratricidal conflict, that in fact was, he committed a treason, whereas Wincenty exactly sticking to his very idea of goodwill and good faith and preserving freedom through law and through justice and control of the power. In fact, he gave Zbigniew a very long defense speech, which in fact included many legal principles of just trial. Although he was sentenced at the end of the day as a traitor, still he had the chance. It was like 2 pages long speech, far more shorter than the accusation, just to present that even with a traitor, even with a brother who committed a crime against you, you have to still keep and follow the rules, just to preserve that justice. But there will be no Wanda without Dragon, as we can say, and that's a specific role of women at the very same time happened just after, because in fact Wanda came out, and because there was no brother who could take the reign after the crack, because one was killed and the other was expelled from the country. So in fact the story about German or Alaman tyrant at the first time it remained in our history, and it developed into the story about her suicidal death because she didn't want to marry. Kadłubek even presents a little bit second, very simple version, that his first version about Wanda was even so funny that he said because of her beauty, the German warriors abandoned the prince. And that's why he was not able to conquer Poland, which at that time was in the problems, yes, in a shaky political situation. So the history of Wanda also allows us to speak about our geopolitical fragility. Not only about the role of women, and that several of them were kings in our country, but also about fragile geopolitical position, of course, with regards to the German Empire, as it was already said, just from the time of our baptism. And in fact, the first fragment that I presented at the very beginning, in fact, relates to that idea. Not only it connects both women in our history and geopolitics. In fact, the very argument that Wincenty formulates in this fragment about the protecting our rational customs, in fact, has a very important argumentative function with regards to the idea that not everything that comes from the German Empire, or even not everything that comes from Christianity, should be always immediately respected if our custom is rational, and it also relates to women and children. Why? Because the argument is used in order to demonstrate the rationality and defend the legitimacy of a pagan custom of the first haircut. That's the very solemn argument and very rich with references to Roman law, where Wincenty presents his skills in Roman law just to defend this very simple custom. Well, it took place when boy was 7 or 10, and it was symbolic entrance into the father's family. So before that moment, a boy's life was connected to mother. That's why mother is so strong and so important in our Polish history. That's why we have no problem with discrimination. We never had discrimination against women, especially mothers. So that's why we don't really follow that criticism, especially in Poland, about that. So in fact, the argument that Wincenty presents is that, look, first haircut, moving from the mother's family to the father's family, is just like ancient Roman adoption. It's just adoption. Just look, it's the same rationality. It's the same idea that is very much related to the institution that is absolutely acceptable, yes, is absolutely adopted by Christians. So, as he says, we can even put some of his words here. It is not to be solemn then, this kind of adoption which is preceded by both legal cause and rational consideration, because the right, the first haircut, was invented and produced by paganism. Shall we think that it deserves to be cursed? That is his question. Such things, on the other hand, include buying, leasing, and other contracts made in good faith. It's obviously a direct reference to the fragment from ancient Roman Justinian's Digest. I mean, look, you buy, you sell, you lease. We are pagans' inventions, and you are still using them. Why don't you accept the first haircut not invented in Rome? And then there is a lesson for us. When you learn the reason for the establishment of specific custom, you will not find our ceremonies neither superstitious nor ridiculous. So we have to always double check. We have to find the reason for a specific institution. Let us therefore beware of the removal of such laws, since we ourselves use such laws. Yes, if we compare and we say that it is just like adoption, we are using adoption, and it is a kind of adoption. There is no reason to not accept the first haircut. Even more, Wincenty makes an accusation that in the Western countries you use adoption, you abuse adoption. You abuse adoption. Even though it is a Roman, but then accepted by Christianity institution, you are abusing adoption, and he refers to numerous situations and cases at that time when, with children out of wedlock, illegitimate children, they were adopted just because they didn't want to get married with the mother of such child. And that's why, very powerfully, Wincenty says they adopt their illegitimate children and cover the forbidden lewdness with some legal cloak. It's a kind of interesting point that, in fact, Innocent III imposes his power over the state and over Roman Empire exactly through the institution of legitimization of illegitimate children. But Wincenty is not referring or criticizing this idea. But it is an opportunity for Wincenty to indicate how one should judge one's own tradition, even if that tradition is pagan. And he warns against ignorance and condemning anything that is not in a mainstream, we can say. And when we look at the next picture, the next image, in fact, relates children and geopolitics, not women, but children and geopolitics. So it is a very strong image of the defenders of Głogów, which is one of the most known battles in Polish history, on August 24th, 1109. And it is at the Silesian town of Głogów, where the battle is, between, of course, Poland and the Holy Roman Empire, so German Empire. And King Henry, or Emperor Henry at that time, he took children, Polish children, as hostages, and he broke the promise, and he chained the child hostages to his siege engines, siege towers, hoping that the people of Głogów will not defend the city in order to rescue their children. And after many days of unsuccessful fighting, the king, of course, abandoned the city, and Wincenty tells us why. So the king, receiving that notice about the problem with these children, which are chained to the towers, to the siege towers, in Wincenty invention, he says, so rather lose hostages than freedom. Again, freedom. Yes. Freedom is more important than children. After all, it is more useful not to spare the lives of a few people than to put many in danger because of petty misadventure. So defense country's freedom. Not only freedom that we already talked about, freedom, internal freedom, freedom of our citizens, freedom for abuse of power of the governor, of the monarch, of the king, but also external freedom. Yes. Sovereignty is so important for our geopolitical fragile situation. Freedom, external sovereignty, which is far more important and can override individual rights, as we can see, of course, consented by the parents themselves. And these are not the only stories regarding external freedom that are presented in the Wincenty's Chronicle. In fact, most famous one attacked the most are those about how Poles not only defended external freedom of themselves, but even defended freedoms of other nations around, and how they fought against Alexander the Great. And they also won with Julius Caesar. So, of course, these are myths that are there in the Chronicle, but they show, and there is this justification. We were fighting with Alexander the Great and with Julius Caesar, not because we wanted to acquire a new territory. No, for gains, for virtue of defending the weaker. So, at some point, we can say it is a myth from the 12th century, but experience of world wars and what Poles did, a little bit contribute to the idea that it somehow entered into our bloodstream and it somehow permeates till these days. That's heroism without benefits. That is presented already in the Chronicle of Master Wincenty. One would say, one historian in fact said that, oh, now I can believe that Master Wincenty was a jurist. He made up so many stories. So indeed, these stories are obviously with some specific reason. And the last image that we would like to present is also very much related to the construction of our Commonwealth, and especially to the relationship between the church and the state, and the role of the church, or more broadly with religion. And of course it directly refers us to the image of Saint Stanislaus, so to the Bishop of Krakow. Master Wincenty was the first one who described his story in a very detailed way, and in fact his story was the story of Saint Stanislaus is a true story. If I can ask to dwell on it.
I have to give testimony about something about Głogów. I was a fourth grader, so I was 11, and I don't remember much from the classes we had. General classes about math, classes general about Polish language, but fourth graders got a book on history. But it was not a course of history. Only the fifth graders, they had regular book on history. We got like just fancy size, book of fancy size, just for kids, with pictures there and short stories about Polish history. And I remember only one image from this book. The image is the siege tower or siege machine engine that with kids there, and I was a kid at the time. And first point was, well, why these kids are in front of the walls of this city, and why these parents, these fathers, are going to kill them with arrows first. Because the idea was they started with their own kids. Okay, the defense started with their own kids, not to give any doubt that we are going to be blackmailed, okay, by in fact, kidnapped kids in this situation who were hostages. So they started to kill with their arrows the kids. And the image was such a fourth grader, okay, you might say cruelty, inserted into our mind. But then I never understand talking to terrorists. That's something that is part of a myth or a part of an identity. But this is the element you teach kids. There are sacrifices a part of our life. I mean, of course, if we look at the cross, we understand that sacrifice is necessary. Okay, and if we give to persons of honor, persons who served, who did more than they were expected to, crosses, even if they are not religious, we understand that there's something more than just a duty, but there's sacrifice, and sacrifice is needed. We don't like this very much in our life. And in fact, this is an introduction to the sacrifice on St. Stanislaus, who is one of the patron saints of Poland. But in fact, Master Wincenty rediscovered this person. As I said at the beginning, Master Wincenty, before becoming master, studied and heard about the oldest story of John Salisbury. But not only of him, but also of his master, that is Thomas Becket. You know the story very well. You know that Thomas Becket was killed by knights of the king in Canterbury Cathedral in 1170. And Vincent learned about that story and learned about what happened, because not only the killing of a priest or bishop who is going to celebrate or returning from celebrating Mass dressed as a priest is sacrilege. Is something that is not against regular order of things, but is unlawful, because this is not an occasion and not a situation, even if you give orders, even if you are ruler, even if you have absolute power, or you think you have absolute power, and your reign, especially in feudal monarchies, is your own property and your own realm, in sense of you decide. But God confirmed that, showing miracles at the tomb of St. Thomas Becket. So even the king repented. So there was a chance for the king. And Vincent learned about that story and said, wait a second, we had someone like this almost 100 years earlier. This is St. Stanislaus, Bishop of Krakow, who was killed in 1079. So 100 years less 9 before Thomas Becket. And he was killed when he was celebrating Mass. And he was killed because the king, whom he helped to be a king, whom he drafted the petition to the Pope, translated it into Latin, and sent it. He was crowned in 1076. Decided to kill a bishop. Of course, we told you before, Vincent was the first bishop to be elected. So that bishop, Stanislaus, was nominated by the king. But the fact that you are nominated by someone, it doesn't mean you are his possession, you are his property, you are nominated to the function you are to execute, to the duty that is entrusted to you. And he was nominated to be a bishop, and he got an ordination to be a bishop. This history is particular. Because, I'm not sure it is communist propaganda only to say, if you want to say something to insert some kind of doubt, you say, this person is controversial. Correct? This controversial person, controversial point of view. Okay, so, Stanislaus was killed 1079, long time ago. It will be 1,000 years in 50 years, correct? but they still write about him that he's controversial. In modern books of history, some historians say, "How was it controversial?" Because one of the chronics that was written by a French or Gaul monk, we call it Gal, anonymous, we don't know the name. He wrote that, well, there was a bishop traitor, or bishop was a traitor. King killed him, so we shouldn't follow the example of traitor, but we shouldn't applaud the king. And this is a short story set by that chronicle that was written 1120 something. So 30 years after the martyrdom of St. Stanislaus. And then we have Master Vincent, who talks about him without any doubt. He himself was also Bishop of Krakow. I mean, Master Vincentius. Stanislav was bishop there. The story about Stanislav is that when they opened the coffin, he was supposed to be quartered. So the penalty for his treason in 1079 was quartered. But then when they opened the coffin, the skeleton was not quartered. So they thought it's kind of prophecy. Poland is divided into 5 pieces. But having this story, maybe Poland can unite as part of St. Stanislaus. Let's pray to St. Stanislaus, who was killed in defense of rights, you can say of the church, but more of rights of the people. The king, at his time of Stanislaus, was conducting wars. And knights were really tired with wars. Tired in the sense they were absent. They couldn't take care of their property, their lands. Some other people were overtaking their lands, also their wives. So king returned to punish unfaithful wives. The legend says that he was torturing them by using small dogs to putting small dogs to their breast. Maybe this is not true, but he was considered a cruel person. And what Stanislaus did was basically protesting against the very cruel rule of the king, whom he was helping before. And the response of the king was assassinating the bishop in very particular situation, where you could start to consider him as not only a victim, but also as a sacrifice. And to talk about that, to say about that to the world, is the merit of Master Vincent, who says something more about just a simple person. You should say no when someone needs to say no, especially if you are in charge of. It's not necessarily your duty, but you have to know what is your position. We can return to Thucydides, who was explaining what is the difference between Greeks and Persians. The difference between Greek and Persians is Persians do not know word no. And of course, this is the part of our culture. This is a part of our culture. But then, especially if you have your 5 minutes and you are in charge, and people look at you and say, you are the person who should take action, you need courage. And courage is the story here. Even if they will call you controversial, who cares? Yeah. I mean, this is the moment when you choose. If you decide this, you might say, I was wrong. The king decided he was wrong. He abdicated. He went to a monastery to repent. And Master Vincent tells us this story without any doubt. Zbigniew was mentioned before. In fact, all the story of Zbigniew and Boleslav III is the story of treason. Zbigniew is presented as an evil person, or Satan itself, for political reasons. He is caught in a moment when he introduced pagans pagans from Pomerania, from the northern part, over Polish lands, to own Polish camp. Okay, he's caught there, being undercover, and then he has a public trial in open space. This is also symbolic, open space, because they tried to lynch him first, but fortunately he was not lynched, and then there's a trial in open space, so before God. You are a traitor. And then all the story, all arguments presented by Master Vincent in defense is very interesting, because he says something about common good, but also about saying, well, but we have some other arguments that we can use. These arguments are quite modern. I want to obtain the same goals of common good, but also going undercover, also using lies and alliances with our enemies, for example, from the West. Okay, and that was the story. And he said, no, there is something natural. You can call it natural law, that is the basis of our decisions. This is inscribed in us, and if you believe it's part of God's revelation also. And that you are trial, and the judgment against you is in front of these this innate justice. He was blinded and exiled. Prince Bolesław, his younger brother, who blinded him and exiled, was excommunicated by Bishop of Gniezno. He didn't try to kill the bishop. Okay, after the story with Stanislav, there was no temptation like this. He made a repentance and a pilgrimage to Hungary, to one of the monasteries. And Master Wincentius was not witness of that, but I think Galanonim was a witness of that. So you have all the political story about relation of powers. And in fact, even if you have one rule, there are still people to whom you are responsible, and people who have the occasion to express their views, and they said, wait, you cannot behave like this. So you are not an absolute ruler. What we have and what is part of our identity is freedom. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank the dynamic duo. This was probably the greatest show at IWP, I don't know, since I spoke last. What Father Longchamp de Berrier says is absolutely true. When I was a child, we had a ditty about Princess Wanda, who didn't want the German. So this is what we used to say. Wanda, co Niemca nie chciała, z czego wcale nie wynika, że zechciała bolszewika. Which means, Princess Wanda who didn't want a German, which doesn't follow that she wanted a Bolshevik. That's how we used to joke. I also got goosebumps listening again to the story of the siege of Głogów, where the Emperor of Germany, having invaded, failed in his objective to take the fortress, and he asked the commander-in-chief, Mściwu, to surrender it to him, and the commander said, sorry, it's not my fortress to surrender, it belongs to the prince. So, to buy time, the emperor allowed the commander to send a messenger to the prince to find out whether the prince didn't want the fortress anymore. And the emperor told the commander to give 100 hostages, warriors. The commander said, I don't have 100 warriors to give you. And the emperor said, we'll take the kids. And when the messenger is back, the following morning, we shall return the kids. And returned he did, he hanged him on the siege engines. And according to the legend that I was taught by my grandmother, you know, grandmothers in Poland are fortresses of reaction. And they are the depositories of all the stories. So the son of the commanding officer, as the towers broke through the fog and were rolling towards the castle, when he was within shout, he yelled at his father, "Bicie z ojcowej ręki nie boli," which means, shoot at us. When the father does it, it doesn't hurt. And so they did. They did shoot at the children because they were going to set the towers on fire. So this was a humanitarian gesture. Had they surrendered, everybody would have died, including the children. So yes, all of it originates from Master Wincenty. And I know that it sounds postmodernist, but actually it is logocentric to view a document and a testimony of a scholar as a composite which our guests so ably have conveyed for us, and I would like to thank them once again. Just don't choose the bullshit. Thank you.
Here in the first row.
Okay, what is the place of all we've heard in Krakow today?
If I understood correctly, what is the?
What is the place of what we've heard in Krakow today?
Do they teach it? Do they have celebrations or what?
Oh, procession.
Well,
Here.
maybe from this one.
Yeah, I'll give. Yeah.
So obviously this tourist thing about dragon, that is only it's a touristic thing, but in fact Stanislaus, whom we already observed, in fact his celebrations are on the 8th of May. Because it was 8th of May 1079, so I mean it's a patron of Poland, so we celebrate his day. So it is like a big festivity, solemnity, we can say, which is not only obviously it's a church thing, but it's present in public mind, obviously. The Chronicle is, well, it has to be restored in a way that we present it. It's a little bit, I mean, not that we present it in the perfect way, obviously not, but in terms of that, to show that usefulness. Because usually, even today, it is regarded to be a kind of antiquarian thing, unfortunately. But with maybe publication that we... there is an English publication done under the who Professor Vincent de Brier is co-editor. The first of it about the great jurists in the great Christian jurists in the Polish history. It is very prominent series of Center Emory for Law and Religion in Routledge with Routledge publisher. There, the first chapter is on Master Wincenty. So. Maybe I don't know whether it's accessible, but at least it's accessible for those who would like to know. Yes, that they know the word "no." So maybe that will be a kind of starting point. Obviously, we are doing some promoting a little bit that kind of approach also in Poland in media, or using non-scholar networks to promote it. So perhaps that would be a way to.
But if I could answer also about this procession. This is a huge procession that's organized every Sunday close to 8th of May, and the entire episcopate is present, and it's the only procession like this in Poland. So still this is one of the main, but we have St. Adalbert also as our patron saint, and he is from the earlier times because it's from the 900s, so it's the 10th century. But this procession there in Krakow is because Krakow organized that, because we have this reliquaries of St. Stanislav in the cathedral that is the most important cathedral, because it's also burial cathedral of Polish kings and important persons, including the late President Kaczynski, who is also buried in this cathedral there. Still, even now, people are questioning not only St. Stanislav, but also the role of the church, and calling him a traitor. So it returns, because it's a touchy issue about relation church and state, and the right of bishops to protest. Sometimes only bishops are to protest. We have against a certain behaviors, for example, of government, or they are accused of not protesting or accepting or going together with the government, expecting them to have their duty to be independent. So this is the element that is still present in our politics, and it's quite current. One of our colleagues, who is a retired professor at our university, publishes again his new article about Stanislas, and still these kind of articles are controversial. Questions? Yeah, please.
Yes. As an American, I feel that we are losing our political culture to foreign or other ideologies. Yet you have demonstrated, despite being invaded and losing your independence for centuries, including the second half of the last century, but you maintain your legacy and your culture and your political history. What is the secret of Poland that escapes contemporary America?
Faith.
Well, yes, the story, this is the series of books about law and Christianity, and about jurists, and telling the history, through persons, and not through rather who than why and what and how. And of course, persons are important, and the witnesses and martyrs are important, but I think that what allowed us to survive also the partition of Poland, 123 years, and especially that period you mentioned, is Catholic faith. That is a part of our identity. It doesn't mean that Catholic means Polish and Polish means Catholic. That's very important for us, because tolerance was important. I have a French last name because my ancestors were Huguenots, were Calvinists, who escaped from France because of Catholic persecution, I understand, after revocation of Edict of Tolerance. And that was 300 years ago. So the tolerance was, Boleslav III was the first one to accept Jews who were escaping from Europe. Then Casimir the Great, founder of our university, founded special city outside of Krakow on the other side of the river. It's called Casimir, for the settlement of Jews who were looking for their own place. There were Scotch Protestants, we have our own Muslims who were loyal subjects of Polish king, who were fighting for Poland, and we still have these families, and they got nobility. So this is the part of identity. Also, this pluralism is the part of identity. But the faith is a glue that helps us to survive, and especially at particular persons. Like, for example, Cardinal Wyszynski, you mentioned that period of after World War II, because then we had also a communist hero, that was Władysław Gomułka, who was imprisoned by other communists, who went out of prison in '56. In '56, they started renewal, and they said, well, communism is okay, but there were some mistakes, so we correct mistakes, and we'll have happiness of communism. And what was verified by the history is that it's impossible to have it. So the question is, what is our identity? And the identity was freedom. Identity wasn't denying that values are outside of us, that there are things that are our own values. We have to reflect on them, and we have to be together. And this is the problem of our societies, of Poland now, and maybe of the United States more even now, that our societies are divided, and how to look for unity. What could be the platform for this? You will do something.
So what role did the Corpus Juris Civilis, published by the Eastern Romans, have in influencing the jurisprudence of Poland?
Oh, thank you very much. This is what I teach normally. So Corpus Juris Civilis was published 15 or 84, I think, because
1 year after.
1580 was Corpus Juris Canonici. And in fact, well, we didn't like absolute rulers. So in the Crown of Poland, we didn't like Roman law. And in fact, Roman law did not influence Polish law. So if we were like without partition, that ended our statehood in 1795, we probably wouldn't have Roman law in our legal system. Lithuanians, with whom we were in union, were less reserved to Roman law, and the second statute, especially the third statute, Lithuanian statute, you have Roman law. But in the Crown, we didn't want that, because although Roman republicanism was important for us in this political thinking, for law, we didn't like Roman law. Roman law came during partition. When we were divided between Kingdom of Prussia, Habsburg monarchy, and Russian Empire, codes appeared. We had great hopes connected to Napoleon. We hoped that he restores our independence. And what was brought was Napoleon code that was legitimately called Napoleon Code in Poland. So there's codification, there's in fact codification of Roman law made in 1804 that is legally binding in Poland since 1809, and even under Russian Empire, under Russian Empire there were various jurisdictions, and we kept that regulation. And then 1811 is an Austrian regulation. So when there was partition of Poland, German regulation that is German civil code that is 1896 and enforced from the 1st of January 1900 started to be enforced in our lands. And in fact we don't like partitions, but the blessing of partitions was Roman law that we got, and we accepted. Like we decided to give electoral rights to women. There was no doubt about it in 1918 when we regained our independence. It was obvious for us that we continue with the Roman inheritance Roman law, or what we got from Roman law. It's very difficult to show what remained from old Polish law. It probably would be like English common law, something like this. That was English common law is influenced by Roman law through canon law only, and basically. But Scots they took Roman law from Low Countries, from the Netherlands. Okay, so the role of Roman law we have in our lands. Starting from the 19th century and independent Poland starting from 1918. So it's a very good question. And in fact, a friend of mine who wrote a book about Polish legal history, he has is a huge book, but there's only one page about Roman law there. And he's right. I mean, I disagree with him not to neglecting Roman law in this sense, but I think well, talking about law without Roman law doesn't make sense if we talk about private law. But yeah, please.
Thank you very much for the talk. I actually visited Krakow a few years ago. I would say it's a very historical city and one of my favorite cities to visit. There's a lot of what was there. My question was about how does the early sort of developments in the Polish legal code and Polish sort of history, and like you say, like between the 10th to 12th centuries, so the early development of the Polish nation affects sort of, I would say, call it like the genetic code of Poland today. Sort of Poland, like the rest of Publica and Polish law, Polish nation code, and Polish culture. How did that sort of these early developments affect Poland today, and how Poland views itself? Because Poland is obviously different from like a country like Russia when it comes to political and legal systems, even though they're both Slavic and whatnot, or Czech Republic, or so. How did sort of these what happened to early Poland sort of make modern Poland today?
Thank you very much. Maybe you had something. Well, two thoughts. One would be the political one, or the public law one. Jagiellonian kings. Well, when Jagiellonian dynasty ended, we had only elections for kings. So we were used to elect king, who was to be crowned, but there was no succession. So Henry de Valois, who was then King Henry III, was elected king, and he was crowned. He escaped. Then we elected István Báthory, and then we elected Vasa, and then even Saxonians. And the surprise of foreigners was, there is a party, people cruising around, and they say, well, what? But your king was supposed to be, yes, he is here. And this is the king. Yes, this is the king.
He's hanging out with us.
So he's one of us. He's president for life, you would say. So the attitude towards the government and the rulers is not a religious one. It's one filled with freedom, because we elect, even if for life, like you elect for life for what? Justice of the Supreme Court, for example, justices, your justices. So that would be the influence of that time for our legal thinking.
For sure, what is also like related to the idea of the church as a defender of freedom, and that is relates also to the question how to defend, how we preserved our culture or our identity throughout the conflicts and the partition. In fact, a very strong political role of the church in terms of protecting individuals. It was always a balancing power towards the government. So the king was one of us, but at the same time, what I think belongs also to our tradition is a kind of suspicion towards government. So he is one of us, but if government is telling us something to do, we rather oppose or do contrary if something is compulsory. So and that was also that I think is a long inheritance of our control of government, our idea that even private interests can deviate the whole Commonwealth, so we have to think about balancing powers of the government and balancing powers of noblemen, which usually are found in faith, in fact, in the people who are connected by different factor than that. And the third idea, which is, I think, very much influential till today, is this religious tolerance that we develop already when we look to the I do this presentation. So when you look at the Wincenty, we already have we have these cases that that relates us to the idea. Okay, we are Poles, we are Christians, but do others have the same? I mean, at that time, the global conflict was between Christianity and pagan world. At the beginning was mentioned Teutonic Order, who invaded Lithuania in order to convert, but it was a fake conversion because they just wanted to acquire, to conquer, and to gain profits. And that's how, and similar, it's already started, similar issues were already during the, when Wincenty was writing his Chronicle, because the church was a little bit also encouraging to make these conversions, even by force. It was before St. Thomas, before Salamanca school, it was before the idea that, it was with St. Augustine idea that sometimes coercion is good. Yes, if it is for your good, it's okay. And in fact, Wincenty asks, because there is, I mean, that is very nice, because about the and whether the church should have a strong position and whether the bishop is has vocation to be martyr. So in fact, Wincenty presents another case where the archbishop was attacked by pagans and he flew away. He went upstairs and he disappeared. He didn't want to be martyr. And Wincenty says, well, sometimes it's okay. Well, sometimes it's okay to preserve your life for faith, for your faithful, be shepherd again. Yes, but then there was this young vicar staying downstairs, and pagans brought him and said, please promised to pay millions of coins at that time, and he promised. And afterwards, he asked Archbishop, "Should I perform that promise or not?" A typical contractual question. Is it a binding promise? And he says, "Well, it's not binding. It's about stipulated money, so in fact it's binding. But there was a duress, so perhaps it's not binding." But then he asked questions. But what about these pagans who promise under duress to take Christian faith? And he says, "Well, it is under duress, but it's for their benefit at the end of the day." But you are right, and it is the starting point for the Krakow School of Natural Law, which started in the times of King Jadwiga and Jagiełło, so 100 years, more than 100 years after Wincenty, which stems from the doubt that Wincenty already presents us. Well, but these crusades are absolutely useless if there is no propagation of faith. What this conversion by force can do if there is no willing person there, willing heart. So, and he says, well, it's better not to do it. And afterwards, after 200 years, we developed the idea that, in fact, with baptism of Lithuania through marriage, that is better way of propagating faith rather than conquering by force, and that in fact it is contrary, and that was the creation of just war doctrine, so important for nowadays when we return. If you ask about that legacy of Master Wincenty and what came afterward, is the doctrine of just war, that in fact there is war can be justified, but cannot be justified only by morality or by your willingness to fight, but it should be in accordance with civil law, with canon law, with moral law, and with natural law. These are 4 requirements that Paweł Włodkowicz sets for the just war, and it led to even to the situation where we, as Catholic country or Christian Catholic country, we fought against Teutonic order with pagans, and we called it just war, and Pope agreed. It was at the end of the day, it was a just war. So I mean, in the protection of dignity of men, which of course later resembled into a 20th century with our opposition towards communism, which why communism was not so able to turn our country into totally Bolshevik country, because of church and because of this strong identity about dignity of personal freedom. So not only external freedom, but also personal freedom connected to values.
One clarification, because I realized I was talking about what happened after Jagiellonian dynasty, but there are ideas that even during the Piast time, so the times of Vincent and then next generations, princes were elected. In sense, because especially Vincent was taking part in the group of Casimir the Just, and he was not the oldest son, so seniority was not on his side. Mieszko was the oldest one at that time, and Casimir conquered Krakow, and he was a ruler, high duke in Krakow. He was poisoned and died, and Vincent was a witness of that in 1194, and then all the question of transition of power, but then there is new generation coming and taking over. So then Mieszko, as old generation, he took power. He took over the power in Krakow for a short period, but that was without any consequences because new generation was coming, and new generation questioned just the rule of seniority, and so succession has to be followed, or is the result of decision of the people, that people accept. There's a broad consent. Of course, that might be only knights and not everyone, not bourgeoisie and not peasants, but that might change. And this is the part of this process that remained from Middle Ages. We have to remember the Tudor story about Middle Ages is presenting Middle Ages as dark era. We have that era like university era, and the time when you could express your views and present your views. Please think about Thomas More. who asked the king as the speaker for the House of Commons to grant to the members of House of Commons freedom of speech in order for the good of the kingdom. Not to have a freedom of speech, a general one, but just to present to the king what they really think. Even if he disagrees with them, he learns what people think about that. If not, he's in a bubble of his own thoughts. We didn't have this problem here. And this is the inheritance of medieval thinking and of this quotes. And then what we have also in one of the best probably legal thinkers, legal jurist, that Leon Petrarzycki, his concept of law as what a psychological theory of law. Law is what people feel by law, what they consider to be law, what they consider to be rules by which they live. So you cannot change it very often. Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. This was really enriching. You covered so much ground. Thought so much we didn't know, and it's hard to know where to start. But on the TV shows, don't they say, hey, thank you for raising our IQ? But the Archbishop, the pagans, it sounds like he would have been a really good Jesuit. Maybe it's not that's kind of but I want to ask you if you can refer us to how we can learn more, research more about this. And also, it sounds like I was going to ask about the common law. There's a lot of parallels between English common law and the innate law, codification of the innate law, and also the Scottish and the English rights of clans and what freedom meant. First, it was freedom from kings or Romans, and then evolved towards individual freedom. But the princess Jadwiga,
yes,
she's a Magyar. She wasn't from the House of Corbin. Was she the House of Corbin?
D'Anjou. She was a cousin of the Plantagenets, meaning Richard Coeur de Lion.
There is a special chapter on her here in this book. So.
Well, because about 1400 was about Corvinus, the great Corvinus dynasty in Hungary. But I want to say that they're very similar to what you said. I heard a joke a long time ago about a Polish soldier, and there's a Russian soldier coming in on one side and a German soldier coming in on the other. What does he do? Depends on whether it's business before pleasure.
Thank you. Those are the comments and questions. So, Professor Żywicki.
Well, first for explaining why, something I never understood, which is why it was such a big deal when my brothers and I got our first haircut. We saw an 8mm film of us bawling sitting in the barber's chair. But I have two questions. One would be first to clarify, you mentioned that Roman law was not a large part of this, but there's a lot of references to civil law, there was references to King Crack, passing laws and the like. What is the relationship here between what you're calling civil law and what I thought would have been a largely customary law system at the time in Poland? And you could clarify whether I'm correct about that. And the second question is prompted by your observation about the book in 4th grade and the kids on the siege machines. That seems like something the communists would not have been very excited about having taught in school. What was it like for you? What was the status of this work during the communist era, the Polish war in schools and the like during the communist era? Did they try to extinguish this or did they tolerate it?
I would answer the first question first, maybe, because I remember communist era. And you know, I was born in Wrocław. That is now Polish city, although this is Breslau, and these are German buildings and German trees there. And even my father was born in Wrocław, that's Breslau, in 47. Wrocław, the slogan was, we've been here, we are, and we are going to be here. And Wrocław is the city of peace. So that was the change of frontiers was nourished by ideology. We returned to old Piast lands, that is from the time of Master Wincenty and all this first Polish dynasty. So they loved this story. They maybe didn't like Bishop Stanislas, but they loved that story. There's another example. We have another individual. This is descripted here. The communists, they loved that story. So the Głogów, because all the communist era was in communist era, the propaganda was turned against Germans. So Teutonic Order was the evil. So they filmed a novel, Teutonic Order, in which there is the biggest battle scene of the Battle of Grunwald, where Polish army fights with Germans, with German Teutonic Order, and they even sing the first Polish religious song, the oldest one, that is Bogurodzica, about Our Lady. And this is in open singing for the entire, I don't know, 1 minute. They sing before the battle, saying, we are united against them. So all this story about Germans, against Germanization, about the Kulturkampf was allowed. And especially making all the stories, they took any connection to Piast era. And of course, we are talking about the times when Silesia, when the western part is Slavic part. Boleslav, Zbigniew had the northern part. When Boleslav, during this problem of treason of Zbigniew, Boleslav had all the south. That is all Silesia of today, with Wrocław going to the eastern border, to the Red Russia. Red Russia would be now Lviv.
Red Ruthenia.
Red Ruthenia. Thank you very much for Ruthenia. Yeah. So that was not a problem, and this is why we were nourished also by these stories of bad Germans killing, using our kids. So these resentments are also present in Poland now. Are also present in Poland now because of course of experience of Second World War and killing of Poles at that time. So there was a good ground for communists to keep that and turn attention from Russians. We couldn't talk about Katyn, we couldn't talk about Polish professors in Lviv, we could talk about what happened in the West, and we had Western Institute. So that was and the first question was, we had statute, we had different groups, that nobility, we had the bourgeoisie, very small. The influence of those who lived in cities was not very important, and they were of German origin, because it was German settlement and German laws for establishing cities. We had a lot of peasants there who were not interested in political life. So basically what we had before 1795 is there were several statutes and privileges that were granted. Kings, in order to have some power, some kind of agreement from the nobility, had to grant some privileges to the nobility. So that was in fact the Republic of the Nobility, although there were some great regulations. And last year we are celebrating 500 years of first Polish codification of civil procedure, and it was very short, only 119 articles. If you compare to thousands of articles of civil procedure now, you would say it's nice. We celebrate and we present in a new book as an element, as an example of what could happen. So Poland, not as a particular one, but as an example of what happened in Europe, because Europe was a combination of this particularism and the pluralism. We are supposed to finish. Yeah, thank you very much. I don't understand this word, but I understand your gestures. Yes, of course. Of course, you started, you finished.
Just to finish with having also important legacy, because we learned much about Polish history, about Polish myths and Polish symbols, but also there is a lesson that is brought to us today also from Wincenty himself, that in fact what Commonwealth needed at that time and what Republic and Commonwealth needs today are moral leaders. And leaders people who are able and brave enough to use skills for the Commonwealth. In fact, the very beginning of Chronicle starts with this idea of Wincenty, which is absolutely true today. And many, I don't know, PR trainers maybe use that. Wincenty says, if you want to enter public stage, so we can say if you want to really contribute to Commonwealth, to your state, to your society, you cannot have fear of defeat. You cannot decline to enter the public stage because you have fear of envy of others, that others will envy you. And you cannot say, I will not enter the stage because of hubris, because it's not worth to work for these people. No, if you have a just reason to start the public life and to say and to act and use your skills for your community and for the Commonwealth, you have to do it. There is a moral imperative that allows to build future. Thank you so much.